Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for an episode of the Cosmopolite Collective. I am your host, Diana Lauritson, and I am here today with Christine Job, the founder and creator of Flourish in the Foreign, which is the ultimate expat travel and wellness podcast for Black women thriving abroad. So, thank you so much for joining us today, Christine.
Thank you for having me. And thanks for the intro. I love that. The ultimate. Yeah, let's go with that. The ultimate
Yes.
podcast and guide.
Sounds great. So this is actually a fangirl moment for me. I was I actually found Christine on one of the social media sites, Instagram, or maybe even a few. Maybe I found her on a few different sites, and I actually reached out to her blindly and said, "Hey, I'm really interested in interviewing you for our podcast. Would you be interested?" And she actually responded and said yes. So for a new podcaster, that's a fangirl moment where you kind of geek out a little bit and you get excited because you're like, oh my gosh, someone actually responded. Um, so thank you so much for agreeing to be on this podcast and being interviewed. I've been following you online, not stalkerish, I promise, but just following you online because I love what you do. I have been really inspired by the stories that you tell, and also just the fact that you are a fellow podcaster.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for reaching out. I mean, I might be slow on the social medias with the DMs, so I get quite a few messages, but I always encourage people to reach out for sure, as long as nobody's trying to do those scams or weird things. Like I have my open DMs. It's totally fine, and I'm just so happy. I'm so happy that Flourish in the Foreign found its way to you, and you resonate so much with the message of it because I started Flourish the Foreign 3 years ago. Now we have,
Mhm.
over 100 episodes and it's award winning. But when I was first starting out, like I don't come from the audio industry,
Mhm.
podcasting industry. So I totally know what it's like to kind of have an idea and reach out to people and be like, I don't know if they're going to go with it or not. Um, but you keep on going and then you have something lovely. And so I'm so happy that you Flourish and Foreign found its way to you and you resonated with it.
Definitely, and I'm so happy that you agreed because this is such a great moment for me, being able to interview a fellow podcaster. So just kind of starting at the beginning, tell us about Christine Job. Who are you? What made you decide to start Flourish in the Foreign?
Yeah, it's a long story, but I'm gonna keep it brief. I'm gonna keep it brief. So, yeah, I'm Christine. I am originally from Atlanta. um, And I always tell people, I have Trinidadian roots, which I think is always important to say in my story because my father and my grandparents immigrated to the United States in the 70s. And I always tell people my mother is Black American, but I always call her side of the family a small but mighty nomadic tribe of women who had no problem like getting up and going. I think that's a really important part of my story because I never learned the fear of getting up and going and moving and being different spaces.
Mhm.
My parents split when I was quite young, and my dad found himself in the Air Force and stationed in Europe here, but in Germany. And so by the time I was 10, I was traveling internationally solo, unaccompanied minor. So I think that's an important part to say, part of my story, because people are like, how do you do this? And upon reflection, I realized like I wasn't socialized with the fear of travel. I wasn't
Mhm.
socialized with the fear of being in a space where I was like, all I know is Guten Tag, and that's about it. And then I picked up a couple of phrases to go to my favorite little pastry when I was like 10, 11 years old to ask for the exact same pastry in German. And they just be like, look at this little chubby little girl always asking for this pastry. Like I didn't develop that fear that I think so many people have. And so they think like my story might be like, whoa, that's so crazy. But I have to always preface with that, like I didn't have that fear growing up. Um, Traveling wasn't something that I was doing a lot and often, but I just wasn't fearful of. Although I
Mhm.
will say, because my dad was living abroad at the time in Germany, my mom would go on girls' trips. Like, I wanted to see the world and I wanted to travel. My dad took me even to Paris for my 13th birthday, and people would be like, whoa, that's big. And as a kid, now it wasn't like glamorous. He didn't take me to like, I don't know, Louis Vuitton. I didn't go to the Chanel store. But, as a kid, it was really normalized for me. So just moving and being around in the world and not making it a quote unquote luxury experience. It was just part of my normal experience. And so I
Mhm.
found myself attending university. I went to University of Georgia, and knowing immediately that I wanted to study abroad. I get asked also in interviews, people are like, do people recruit you to study abroad? And I was like, no, nobody could beat me back from it. Like I went into my academic advisor and was like, listen, sir, ma'am, I can't recall. This is what we're about to
Mhm.
do. You need to let me know how we're going to arrange it, but I'm going to study abroad. And I did. And actually, and this is always a moment that I'm like, oh my gosh, 16 years ago, I studied abroad here in Valencia, Spain, the city that I now call home. And it is
Wow.
wild because a lot of things happen in 16 years. One, I think as, adults, we're living our life,
Mhm.
we just were like 16 years. How is that possible? But I'm only like 20 years old. And we're not 20 years old. But it's just wild to see
Now we're
how much,
not.
right? It's wild to see how much a city has changed, how much I've changed, and how that kind of opportunity really changed my life, which I did not have an Emily in Paris experience. It was an okay experience, but it wasn't glamorous actually. But
Mhm.
what it taught me was like, okay, this is what it means to be a Black woman abroad in this particular situation. I was the only Black woman. I was the only person of color in my university's cohort when I studied abroad here. And at the time, at least at the department where I was studying at the Universidad de Valencia, there were a lot of Black people. They were like, wow, at you. It's like, yeah, look at me. Here I am studying. And, you know, I didn't let that deter me. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm in love. But what it did was like, okay, this could be part of my reception being abroad. Like
Mhm.
people can be curious. It can be like this, could be that, all these different types of, I guess, possibilities. It just didn't deter me. It was just one of those things where I was just like, all right, next time I want to travel, solo, and not in a huge cohort of white people, I think I'll have a better time. So, and so, after that, I graduated. I attended university in Miami, and I graduated from university and started a job at a startup immediately out of law school. So while everyone else was studying for the bar, I was like in this startup in downtown Miami. The founder calls me and is like, "Do you have your passport?" And I was like, "Of course I have my passport. Like, who do you think I am?" She didn't know me like that. And she's like, "Cool, just come over to the office and drop it off." And I was like, "I need more questions. You can tell me some more things that are happening." And she's like, "Yeah, we're going on trade mission to Namibia and South Africa." So like
Mm.
I was geeked. I had never been to the continent at that point, and I was like, let's go. That's all you need to tell me. I didn't need to know anything else. And I always mention that story because for me, something really profound happened on that story or in that trip. We were in Namibia on this trade mission, and we were being hosted by the then U.S. ambassador to Namibia, who was a Black woman. Now,
Mm.
at this point, I graduated from I graduated from law school. I would think that I was a well-versed young woman. So I knew intellectually Black women could be ambassadors. But I never met
Mhm.
one. And something about being, welcomed into her compound and her space and having that kind of reception with her and seeing her changed a lot for me. I was like, I want to be abroad. I really want to be abroad. Like, I really want to be out here. Like, it just changed something for me. So that was really, really important for me to experience. Now, how did I
That was
make
the
it to
turning
say?
point.
It was the thing that was like, how do I do it? How do I do it? And I really couldn't figure it out, to be completely honest. I couldn't figure it out. I was asking my mom. I was like, "Do you know anybody who lives abroad?" And she was like going through her Rolodex, for all the youngins who are watching this.
Yep.
A Rolodex. It's kind of like your contacts in your phone, but in paper form, in a box that
Yes.
people used to keep.
I
So
remember Rolodex. The
right?
Rolodex,
You just
yes.
like flipping through and calling people on landlines and leaving emails and just being like, what do you do?
Hmm.
How can I do it? And I really couldn't figure it out. And so I was just living my life. I had left my startup job in Miami. I was back in Atlanta working and being consultant. I had an opportunity to actually work with another startup in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia,
Mm.
which was I was like, oh yeah, I'm hot stuff. I'm like about to I took a whole farewell tour with all my friends. I was like, I'm gonna see
Like, how
y'all.
are you getting all of these? Where are these startup opportunities in all these countries?
Girl, I'm a hustler, grinder, a network, and I have no problem in asking, which I think is really important
Hmm.
for this. But so I did my little farewell tours. It's like, I don't know when I'm going to see y'all because, I'm moving to Asia. Goodbye. And how about like, I I got the job offer in May, and then in July, they reneged and basically were like, oh, JK, we can't afford you. We're not going to do it. And I'd already packed up all my stuff in Atlanta. I was
Oh
already submitting
no.
documents for visa, and I was deeply distressed. Deeply distressed. One,
Yes.
just ego was like, egg on my face. I told all my friends, I'm like, bye, can't wait,
Yeah, yeah.
come visit me in Southeast Asia. That was happening. My beautiful apartment in Atlanta, gave it up. I'm in the suburbs with my mom. I'm like, this is not how this is supposed to go.
Hmm.
However, I went on a hike because I was angry and I was like, I need to get some fresh air. I go on this hike, and when I say hike, it was like a path that went up a mountain, but you could get back to your car,
Yeah.
within 30
Yeah.
minutes. It wasn't like, yeah. So
Yeah.
I go on that hike, and, God, universe, whoever speaks to me. And really, it was like, you need to go on the Camino de Santiago. You need to walk the Camino de Santiago. Now, what is the Camino de Santiago? It is a 800-kilometer, 500-mile trek. One of the routes is 500 miles across Spain. Why would this come to me? It's a good question because I'd only heard about it one time before. So this was July, 6 months before
Hmm.
in January. Me and my friends had a New Year's dinner. We were talking about everything we wanted and talking about our bucket list. And one of my girlfriends was like, yeah, I want to walk the Camino de Santiago. And I was like, what's this? So when she tells me, it's like, yeah, you just walk across Spain and you think about your life. And I was like,
Mm.
why do you want to do that? Like, why? And I was like, where do you stay? And she's like, you have everything you need on your back, and you stay in these hostels around Spain. And I was like, oh wow, girl, that's amazing for you, but like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So flash forward in July when this thought is coming to me, I'm immediately rejecting it because I'm like, oh, I think you misdirected this. This is for someone else, God, universe. Like, this is not for me. Like, what? But
Hmm.
it really haunted me. Like, it was just dogged for a couple of days until I looked it up. When I looked it up, I was like, oh no. Because I was like, 800 miles. I'm a frail woman. I can't just be like trekking across Spain. And it's one of those things that like the universe really pushed me because I found myself, I was like online looking at it at a forum. I scroll down, I'm like learning about it. I'm like, oh no, this is not safe for a single woman. I scroll down and there's like a older woman who's like in her 80s and she's like, this is my 16th Camino. And I just, it's like, okay, I cannot let grandma outdo me. Like, because at this time I was 26 or 27. So I was just like, I had no excuse. And I
Mhm.
was deathly afraid. And I've never been really afraid like that before in my life. I
Yeah.
talked to my girlfriend about it. She's like, yeah, you should do it. And I was like, I was actively seeking out people to tell me no, and no one was telling me no. And I was like, okay, you guys are not hearing the words coming out of my mouth. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Tell me no. I went to REI thinking, like, these people know what's up. And they're gonna be like, girl, absolutely not. And they were like, yeah, you could do it. It's fine. Here's all the gear. I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. It was crazy. There's a lot of other things that kind of happened that were definitely in alignment that
Mhm.
were just the universe screaming, go girl. But it wasn't warm and fuzzy. I think sometimes people think like
Yeah.
signs from the universe is like cotton candy and dreams and rainbows. I cried every day before I went to the Camino. And I was there. I got, the letter and the email where people where they were like, JK, are you not coming to Malaysia? To the moment where I flew out of Atlanta to France was less than a month. So I really acted on it and I made
Mhm.
that kind of leap. A lot of drama ensued because I was like, oh, I didn't do any real research because I was too busy crying this entire time to actually do research. Long story short, I start on the French side of the Pyrenees. I cross over the Pyrenees. I walk across the country of Spain, and I end up on the Atlantic coast of Spain in 33 days. And when that happened, when I hit the sand on that final day, I realized one, Spain is a beautiful country. This is a beautiful country. I
Mhm.
love the lifestyle. I've had so many adventures. It's incredible. But also, I was like, I can do anything, not from an ego place, but just from this visceral knowing. I can do anything. Literally, paso a
Mhm.
paso, step by step, I can do anything. My feet will hurt. I'll take some days off. I'll curse and yell at the wind. I'll cry, but I can do anything. If I just walked across Spain, I can do anything. So after that, I was like, I'm going to move to Spain, and I don't know how. Now that was 2014. I didn't move to Spain in 2017. I had a lot of resistance in those 3 years until I moved to Spain. I wanted to do it in the way that I
Mhm.
thought I should, which was like, okay, I'm gonna get a corporate job. You're gonna sponsor me. I'm a highly skilled individual, so I want a highly skilled visa. Like, you know, but
Mhm.
it didn't work out that way. I ended up because I'd been working for myself, being severely burnt out and just being like, I gotta go. And I ended up coming here first as a English teacher, and I will use the quotes here because I respect our educators, and I was like, I am not really qualified for this job. Um, but I moved here for that as a pathway just to take a breather, try to like figure out what is it that I need and what I want, especially being taken out of that kind of pressure bubble that I think, is Atlanta, especially at that time with startups and entrepreneurship, but even just like your social circle, as you know, you went to law school, you got a lot of friends that are who have those golden handcuffs and they're like, oh, it sucks so much, but they're like wiping their tears with their money. And you're like, should I be wiping my tears with my money too? Like, what? Did I do the wrong thing? So I needed to get out of that space so I could hear the universe clearly, so I could hear myself clearly, so I could really get to know myself. And so I moved here to Spain August 2017. I first lived in La Rioja. Then I moved to Barcelona. I lived in Barcelona for 3.5 years. And then I moved here to Valencia. I've been here for 2 years. And everything has unfolded in the way that it should. It hasn't been perfect, but it's been an incredible journey. And in that meantime, I was able to create Flourish Foreign. When I think about it, I laugh, I want to cry, so many different things because Flourish Foreign really was spurred, like the catalyst, the creation, the birth of it was really, it was just about, I kept on meeting fantastic Black women abroad traveling and then living in Spain. And they would tell me these amazing stories. And I'm not a really great storyteller where I could be like, okay, this is what she told me. Let me tell you. I'm the type of person that's going to be like, then this happened. No, wait, then this happened. Wait, okay, backwards. Da, da, da. And I was just like, okay, these are really great stories that people should hear, and I can't deliver. So I wanted to capture them, and I wanted to showcase them because I would have desperately devoured these types of stories had I heard them when I was 17 or when I was 22 and I was trying to figure out how do you move abroad, or when I was 26. Like, just these different lifestyle choices, different careers, different ways of just being and doing your life would have been so important to me. And so that was kind of one of the main reasons I started it. Also, because I just find it so important for Black women to tell our own stories. I find it
Mhm.
so vitally crucial for our history to be well documented. I do not want in
Mhm.
50 years some white British man talking about Black women living abroad as if he knows what he's talking about. You know, like how they try to do like Egyptians or
Mhm.
something. I'd be like, I
Yeah.
don't even think they said that. I don't think the hieroglyphics say that. Like, I don't believe you, right? I think it's just so important for Black women to tell our own stories and for
Mhm.
the beauty and variety of Blackness, which is not a monolith, to be expressed, for the beauty and the diversity of womanhood to be expressed, right? And then just the different interactions, the receptions and perceptions. Because, I think people think that one Black woman's experience in Barcelona or Turkey or Nigeria or Australia means that's how everybody's living and getting down. And it's just not true. And so
Mhm.
those were the reasons why I started the podcast. Again, I had no experience. I did not know what the heck I was doing. I did not think anybody was going to listen to it except for my mom. When I launched it, it was in the middle of lockdown here in Spain. I launched it in May of
Mm.
2020. And
Oh,
so
wow.
my mom, an interesting aside, my mom was locked down with me unexpectedly. She was in Mallorca in February of 2020, and she came to visit me in Barcelona because I was moving apartments, and she got stuck with me until September 2020. So from March to September 2020. And so literally I just thought the lady down the hall was just going to listen to my podcast, and that was it. And I've been so blessed with its reception, with the stories that I'm allowed to capture. I just don't take it lightly. And now we're 3 years in and over 100 episodes. I can't believe it. And I get,
Wow.
emails and DMs all the time about how, my podcast affects people's lives, which just feels so crazy because I'm just not that person. I'm not a person that thinks
Mhm.
like, oh, I change people's lives. Like, that's wild. And
Mhm.
yeah, my podcast does. And it's weird. It inspires people to take that leap. It brings people like this whole new way of living life. But maybe even more importantly, it affirms my guests because these are Black women who are just like,
Mhm.
as Black women do, like, I'm just living my life, girl. It's nothing special. I'm just living my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they hear back their story and they're like, oh, wait, am I that girl? I'm like, yes, I was telling you, you're that girl. So I think that's so important. I'm so, so very proud to have created something like that. So that's the long/brief story of who I am. and how I ended up here, here in Spain and here with this wonderful podcast, Flourish and Florin.
Yes, there's so much to unpack with your story. As you were talking, I'm like I was jotting down notes because I'm sitting here going, okay, I want to ask her about that and about this and about this. There's so many different things that I think our listeners would be, would really want to ask you if they had the opportunity. And so I'm just gonna try to go through some of the things that I jotted down, and hopefully you can expand on those a little bit. One of the things is the actual process of moving
Mhm.
abroad. So I travel all the time, and my friends are always like, "Oh my gosh, you're always in this country or that country or whatever." And every time I'm in a country, I think I even emailed you this, I get depressed when I have to come home because I'm like, I want to be there and I want to, I want to live that life. And there's just something about being abroad where there's a difference between, when you're in the States and it feels like everything is about what you do. Everything is about your career and, how much money you make and, like where you're at in your career and those kinds of things. Whereas, like, when you're living abroad in some countries, it's actually considered rude to just kind of start a conversation with, what do you do? That's not, people don't define themselves by their career. And so, oftentimes when I come back in the States, I'm always like, I want to go back to, whatever country I was just in and I want to live there. But you actually did that. You made this move, you did El Camino and it changed your life. And then you made the decision that you were going to move abroad. What are the like nitty gritty details kind of on how you actually made that move from being in Atlanta to going abroad?
I'll tell you how I did it. Then I'm gonna tell you how you should do it. I did it.
Okay,
I,
fair.
I joined a program called um, now it's okay, North American Language Assistant Program. It's ran through the
Hmm.
Ministry of Education and Sport here in Spain. And the premise is that they're trying to increase the English proficiency here in Spain. Well, that's allegedly, that's the whole political
Hmm.
issue. But like that's the aim. And so they have English professors, right? They have English professors, but they want fluent speakers, native speakers to come in to help with conversation and culture. And so it's a really interesting program. It's changed a lot ever since I did it. So take that with a grain of salt what I'm going to tell you. But it was
Hmm.
all you needed to do was have like a college diploma, a letter of recommendation, fill out your application, um, and you could like kind of choose what kind of regions you prefer to be in, and they would try to like match you to a place. They gave you a stipend, and that stipend could range from 700 euros to 1,000 euros, depending on where you are
Hmm.
in the country. I think that has changed. They give you some insurance, and they give you a student visa so you can move abroad. And so I did that, and I was resistant to it because I was like, I'm not a teacher. And then I was just kind of like at a point where I was like, I'm burnt out. And the person that I am, if I'm boots on the ground, I'm going to make something shake. That's who I am as a person. And that's not for
Hmm.
everyone. But I'm just like person like, okay, if I get there, I can work something out. Which I did. But I'm also
Hmm.
very persistent and lack shame in a lot of situations where I'm just like, tell me yes or tell me no. I don't care. Um, so that's
Hmm.
how I moved abroad. And because I did the Camino, I chose the region of La Rioja, where a lot of people want to move to Barcelona, they want to be in Madrid. I liked La Rioja. I lived in the capital, even though it's like a town called Logroño. La Rioja is known for its
Hmm.
wine. Like it was a chill experience. It's beautiful. I was like, yeah, this is great. The cost of living is like ridiculous. I was just living this life, right? I was just, let me paint the picture. I worked at two
Mhm.
schools, two elementary schools, which was also like a shock because at that time, I think only one of my friends had a child and there was like a newborn. So all of a sudden I walk into school and everybody's
Mhm.
2 feet tall and I'm like, oh wait. And everyone's hands are sticky and they all want to touch you. And you're like, what is happening? I wasn't ready. Not ready for this. Um, but I work at two schools, but I only work 12 hours a week, which was wild. 12 hours a week, 3 days a week. So and how I actually had it was like on one school I was working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The other one I was working Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So there was times where I was just like, I was just out here. I was just out here. I rented an apartment in downtown Logroño, like right next to the old town. It's so beautiful. 3 bedroom, 2 bath, exposed brick, uh, high vaulted ceilings. I had the primary bedroom for myself with its own bathroom with a bathtub, which is so unheard of in Spain. They hate baths for some reason. I'm like, I need it. And I rented out the other 2 bedrooms. So then I'm like, I'm not paying for any of my accommodation or anything like that. This is how I moved abroad, and I want people to do better than me. I was still burnt out. I was still suffering from a lot of anxiety, and I still was just, I didn't feel the way I thought I was going to feel. Now I'm in La Rioja. There's
Mhm.
vineyards and wine. The wine is so cheap. It's like 80 centimos to like, oh, you want a really nice glass of wine? €3. Like I'm having lushy lunches that turn into dinners, like I'm having this life that people would love to have. And my friends are like, take more pictures. And I'm like, I'm not a paparazzi. I don't really do that kind of thing, right? But I'm still unhappy.
Mhm.
And the issue was that I really didn't move abroad with intention. That's the thing that I have to tell everyone. Like, you have to do so with some type of intention. And intention is not just like, I intend to live a good life and drink a lot of wine. It really has to be about a deep form of introspection to know who you are and what is not working in your life and what do you want in the future. And that is something that until I took the time to do that, I was drinking a lot, I was having a great time. Um, and I was traveling, but was my life better? No, it wasn't. And I think that is the rub. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't want to talk about when they make these kind of spontaneous moves, even if they've been thinking about it for years and years and years, like I had, like all of a sudden things are not clicking. And I realized one, I was still comparing myself to all my friends. All my friends are making all this money, living here, living in DC, living in New York, doing this stuff. And I'm feeling guilty for only working 12 hours a week.
Mhm.
But that's the choice that I made. They working 90, 70 hours a week. That's the choice that
Mhm.
they made. I really had to learn how to own my choices. And I really needed to have a vision of what a life well lived for me meant. And I needed to get to know myself to do that. Once I started doing that and
Mhm.
be honest about, look, I didn't want to write memos. That's why I'm not a lawyer. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do that. Like, I was just going to have to be okay with me doing something different and it looking different. And I had to give myself permission to do that. And so I actually have a guide anyone can find on the website called Move Abroad with Intention. And I launched it, I guess, maybe 2 years ago. And I've always
Mhm.
gotten some really good feedback because it's a 40 plus page guide full of just journal prompts for people to get really honest about themselves. Because this is the thing, you move abroad, you bring yourself, good, bad, indifferent. You bring yourself.
Mhm.
So, like, changing your geographic location is cool, right? Like on Friday night, I was just kicking it with some girlfriends in the plaza. We're just, being silly, talking shit, basically. And we're like looking around. It's like
Mhm.
this old church, because we were sitting there just talking, and then people were like taking pictures, and we're just like, oh yeah, we are in this like old ancient plaza, just kicking it because that's the thing, it just becomes part of your everyday. So it's like, yeah, that's cool, but like what is it that you need and you want, the uh
Mhm.
the ancient or the historic and beautiful streets of Paris are not going to save you. It's beautiful, but it's not going to save you. So I did this guide, Move Around with Intention, so that you could figure out, okay, what are the things that are working in my life in all these kind of major areas of your life, whether it be financially, whether it be physically, professionally, emotionally, spiritually. And from the things that are working and the things that are not working, then going through them and saying, okay, from things that are working, how much of that is environmental, meaning like it has to do with where I am? How much of that is me? Which is great,
Mhm.
right? Because the things that are environmental give you a clue to the things that you should look for in your next move abroad, when you move abroad. And the things that are you, you're like, okay, cool. I'm bringing that with me. Check that off. Also, on the other hand, the things that are not working in your life, how much of that is environmental? Cool. Those are definite no's. We're not going to do that abroad. We're not going anywhere like that. But the things that are me that are not working out, I have to be mindful of, right? I have to be mindful of,
Mhm.
okay, like if I have an issue with comparison or some type of anxiety, like I gotta, like moving to Spain and drinking is not going to be the balm for it, right? Like I need to address it,
Mhm.
get a therapist, or at least be mindful of it and know that this is something that's going to be ongoing for me as I go abroad. And that's what I mean by going abroad
Mhm.
in the best way, right? Because the thing is that you can spend all your time trying to find the best city, go to Porto, go to Lisbon, go to Accra, wherever the hot spots are right now. But honestly, it's
Mhm.
not so much about that, about the city. It really is about you, about who you are right now, and
Mhm.
what is the vision of a life well lived, and who is it that you are trying to open up space to become? That's the thing. That's what you have to be honest with. And I think that being in the United States is really hard, and I'll speak for myself because we get conditioned and socialized to want certain things, especially for certain markers of success. No matter how old you are and how grown you are, you
Mhm.
should be thinking for yourself. We still do, you know? But like, what am I going to do with a Cadillac Escalade in Spain? Like, what am I doing? No, I don't need that, right? So, what is it that are markers of success for me? Markers of a successful life, a life that's enriching, or a marker of professional life that is thriving? What does that really mean so that I can pursue that and I can nurture that abroad? That's what you want to take with you because then moving abroad can really be a portal for transformation. Because if not, people just think, oh, I'm just going to go someplace else. It's different. I'll be different. Oh, like for little kids, yeah, because little kids are not so resistant. Grown adults will kick and scream about not having their favorite cereal for breakfast. And they will complain about it in all the expat forums. They're like, why don't they do this? And it's like, you're in a different country and you have to surrender, not just to the bureaucracy, which
Mhm.
here in Spain, mm, but you have to surrender to everything, all the changes that you wanted. You have to surrender to yourself. That's the thing. If not, you're just
Mhm.
going to be resistant. You're going to be like, oh, Colombia is not that great. Oh, whatever is not that great. These countries are minding their own business. Like you came to them. They're not here to razzle dazzle you. They are a space for you to cultivate a life well lived for yourself. But if you haven't done that internal work,
Mhm.
if you don't have a vision, you just think like, I'm just going to be abroad and some magic fairy dust is going to come down and like change your life. And a man's going to get Amazon Prime to you or on a white stallion. Like it's not happening. It's just not, right? So you have to go abroad with intention. You got to be honest with yourself. You got to be brave enough to not just move abroad, but to be yourself abroad, to be honest with my favorite version of myself,
Mhm.
not my aspirational version of myself. That's what I always tell people. I'm like, don't move abroad being like, oh yeah, I need to go somewhere where I can like meditate for 4 hours a day. Do you meditate for 4 hours a day now? I don't. Um, Maybe one day I will, and I'll drink all the water that I should, but I don't.
Right?
Like
Yeah.
my favorite version of myself is waking up slow, even though I wake up early, being able to do all the activities I like to do, people not messing with me. being unmenaced
Mhm.
generally. It's having lots of time to be intimate with my social network. I love hosting parties and I love being invited to
Mhm.
parties. And parties is, especially here in Spain, because everybody's so social, it's just like kicking it in the plaza. All of a sudden, we're here for 4 hours. What are we doing? We're just sitting on the bench, just talking, talking, talking. Going to someone's house for a tardeo, going
Mhm.
for dinner. I wanted to have that because that's one of my favorite things to do. Is just gathering people. So I need to be in a society in which
Mhm.
gathering is looked well on and people are social. I don't know if I would thrive in like Scandinavia. One, because of weather, and I'm a baby with weather. But like with cultures that are a little bit more insular, and honestly, one of the reasons why I left Barcelona because Barcelona's in Catalonia, the Catalans have their own culture. They're a little bit
Mhm.
more insular for my liking. I'm from Atlanta. I used to live in Miami. I'm Trinidadian. Like I like warmth and hospitality. That's who I am. We don't gotta be best
Mhm.
friends, but like I like good mornings and stuff like that. So knowing yourself and also
Mhm.
knowing the life and the version of yourself that's delicious that you can nurture,
Yeah.
that you be happy to nurture while you are pursuing, your 4 hours of meditation a day, in which I am up to 15 minutes a day. And so 4 hours is going to take some time. But like in the meantime,
Good for
that's where we're
you.
going. And so that's how I moved to Spain, but this is how I think you should move abroad is with that type of intention. After you have those things
Yeah.
locked in, then you start the Googling. Then you start asking people about this place and that place. But you have to have a firm idea of who you are and what this next chapter of your life is going to be, or what you want it to be, what you desire, what you crave. Like, allow
Mhm.
yourself to have some of that sensuality because like moving abroad is a hassle. It's a hassle. So you want to be doing all this work and logistics and all this stuff that's to an aim that's going to lead or at least create a space for a very delicious life, I think. Um, cause yeah, it's a hassle. So just to do it is like, don't do that.
Definitely. I'm so excited that you agreed to be on the podcast and so happy to have you. And also, I just want to reiterate if you're interested in living or moving abroad and what that really actually looks like, please check out flourishintheforeign.com. There's all the social media sites, all of the podcast platforms, Spotify, YouTube. Follow Christine and Flourish in the Foreign. And
Thank you for having
thank you
me.
so much again for being a guest on our show. Thank you.